Hi guys, I'm Joe from Barclayss, here to talk to you guys about difficult conversations. This is going to be a little bit about influencing, a little bit about general communication, a little bit about body language. So these are the things that you're going to need to have successful, difficult conversations. Those are the types of conversations that maybe you don't want to have, or maybe the types of conversations where you want the pay rise, that type of thing. So we're going to focus on body language in this video, and there's a couple elements that we want to look at. Firstly, the actual physical body language side of it, and we're going to also focus on the setup of our positioning and room. First of all, we want to create a neutral space for both parties involved. A neutral space is obviously a space where both parties are comfortable. So we don't want to go into the other person's office, that's their power zone. We don't want to go into our office, that's our power zone. So we want to go to something that is an office anybody can use, somewhere away from other people so they're not interfering with the conversation. So the next thing we want is an open space between people. For instance, if we're sitting down at a table, I'd be sitting facing this way and we'd have ideally the individual sitting next to us at that 90-degree angle, which is really important. Having enough space between us that we're comfortable, but not so far away that we don't feel like we're working together. When we're face to face with somebody, we've got this initial confrontational positioning. As we move to that 90-degree, we're sort of neutral. And if we go a bit further out, side by side is collaborative. Now I want to tell you guys a little story about how I learnt about this back from many years ago when I used to be a nurse working in emergency. Generally when people are in emergency, it's because they're sick, their partner's sick, they're injured, no one wants to be there, except for the nurses, of course. So I'd be working in emergency and we have the security that would take care of a lot of aggressive situations for the most part, but then it would come down to me being one of the female nurses would tend to be on me to look after old mate who's standing there, usually a bloke, usually an aggressive bloke, and there's usually drugs and alcohol involved. So I had two jobs, keep old mate here and keep him calm. So if we can imagine, we just have to imagine here, there's a nice little bed here and maybe a chair, and we've got an individual who's a little bit frustrated. And I would come up and do all the things I thought I was supposed to do. Hey mate, how you going? Try and meet him at eye level, nice, low, monotone talking, all that kind of stuff that I thought was gonna help the situation. And I had horrible results. So I had guys who were attacking me, I had guys who were losing it and swearing and going all over the place. And we even had people who were running through emergency that we're tackling. It was just ridiculous. So we actually had the police come in and do some work with us, which was really great. The police deal with violence and aggression all day. So I had this awesome female officer who came in to do some work with me. So she observed me for about 4 hours or so. And in that period of time, had multiple people losing it, aggression, no physical violence, but threats of violence, things like that. And she came up to me and said, Joe, look, I see what you're trying to do, but you're doing a pretty bad job. She started to explain to me what I was doing wrong and why. So in my situation, I was so focused on keeping this individual in this place that I lost sight of the fact that I was unintentionally crowding them into that space. Because I've been attacked multiple times, I was obviously a little bit on edge, so my body language was showing that to people. So what she taught me to do is a standard police tactic that you may have seen them use on the street. Quite often the police will be talking to someone on the street and they want to get them in the back of the paddy wagon, and they want to do it with as little fuss as possible. Obviously they don't want to drag them to the ground and handcuff them. What the police will do is, rather than facing face to face with the individual, which as we spoke about before is combative, they'll take this sort of stance. Oh yeah, okay, really interesting. So they're talking to the individual, it feels nice and calm. Actually, they're in a defensive stance. They've got their hand on their jaw here. They can bring the other hand back really quick. They're in a position where they're comfortable if it gets combative, but they've taken a bit of a step back from the individual, which is probably the most important stuff for us. Don't tend to need our hands up in the everyday situation, but that step back is huge. That step back to maybe a 45, getting towards a 90, is moving us into neutral territory. Someone can be combative, frustrated, and their aggression can go over our shoulder. I can still be frustrated and I can express my aggression away from the individual. This is a step back not just from each other, but a step back from an adrenaline dump. When we have an adrenaline dump, our prefrontal cortex shuts down, we lose all of our executive functions, we go into fight, flight, freeze. We're no longer effective in a situation. So the big thing that we took out of that is, when we're with an individual, if we want to get a positive outcome, let's try and be neutral to collaborative. It's always really important. So if you're interested to see any other videos, I've got one here, and you can also subscribe to Barclayss here.